There are men that they don't want confrontation.
Gotcha.
I'm not that guy.
Hey guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of Heart of the Matter. We are your hosts, Marcus and Scott. This podcast takes a deep dive into the issues of a man's heart, and it is our absolute desire to present practical ways to be centered in all areas of life.
Today, we're going to be discussing how to deal with conflict in your personal life, at work, and conflict doesn't always have to be negative. You know, the word states, if it be possible, as much as life in you, live peaceable with all men. Most of the time, I find myself, if it be possible.
If it's possible.
But the scripture also says, as much with life in you. So it is up to us to have a place in this conflict and have the tools that we need to deal with conflict appropriately.
Gotcha.
You know, most men live in a fight or flight mentality.
Absolutely.
So let's get to the heart of the matter.
Let's get to the heart of the matter.
You know, the first thing we're going to talk about is dealing with conflict in your personal life. And one of the main topics is gaslighting somebody. And my life has been, I've been pretty good at gaslighting people because I don't like the spotlight to shine on me when I'm wrong in these conflicts. And one thing I did just recently was gaslight my wife. And I promise you it didn't go well for me. It was not a good thing. You know, we had this door-to-door salesman come and he's telling my wife how great this security system is. And I just don't happen to be at the house.
Gotcha.
I went to buy some firecrackers with my girls. I get back and my wife says, hey, this guy stopped by and he's got this real great system. And he says he's gonna come back by. And I said, okay. I said, why didn't you tell him going about his business? Man, we got a no soliciting sign. Why is he bothering us? Well, it sounds like, it really looks like a system that we might want to use. So the guy comes back, he gives me a spiel. And I'm like, all right, man, just sign me up. So I'm outside cooking, doing my own little thing. And I tell her, hey, they're supposed to come install this system. Well, why'd you buy it? I told her, because you told me to. You told the guy to come back. Well, I didn't want it.
Wow.
And so when you gaslight somebody like that and make them feel wrong in the situation, it's a way to deflect all of the blame off of yourself.
Okay.
And like I said, for many years of my life, I was very good at it. I would never wanted to be held responsible for my actions. So I would put all the blame on somebody else and make them feel like, oh man, I was wrong. I shouldn't have did that. Right. And when you do that, you're really not resolving a problem.
No.
All you're doing is making it where it makes the other person feel bad.
I love that you said you were gaslighting her. I'm not sure who was gaslighting.
Exactly. It could have been either one of us.
In the story that was told, I'm not sure. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna let that go. I don't know who was gaslighting who, but the fact that I love that you are willing to take accountability, that fits somewhere in the heart.
Yes.
And you can see that it is you oftentimes wanting to deflect the attention from yourself or the accountability or the responsibility of the issue and put it on someone else because it's just easier. Let's just be honest. It's most of the time it feels like it's easier like that. But if we're really looking to get to a resolution, then I think to own it is something that needs to be done when we're talking about conflict. I think for most people, we want it to be somebody else's fault. Not very few people are like, oh, it was me. It was my fault.
I'll take responsibility for that. You know, I've been married almost 15 years. You're at 22, 23?
I'm going to give you a couple more. This year will be 23 years married. We've been together for 24 years. Yes,
and
sir.
so for me personally, it's taken many years to learn how to resolve conflict in a relationship. And there's still times when it's not resolved perfectly.
Absolutely.
You know, we still have times where we walk away from it and we're just on let bygones be bygones. And we may revisit it at a later date, you know, especially if we're in a heated conversation. It may be where we say, hey, we're just not going to talk about this right now because from my standpoint, I'll do more damage than help the situation because I become immediately hot-headed and I'm going to say things that are hurtful and it's not going to benefit our relationship at all.
I wanted to talk about this probably at another point and we can revisit it again. But I think that when you're talking about conflict, right now you're talking about personal conflict, and especially between a couple. Oftentimes, no one's listening. I think that in a lot of conflict, people are wanting to be heard, but no one's really listening to the other. And we're only looking for an opportunity to get back in on. So something that you said, like you said, you would say something that's hurtful, and there's a reason why you do that. I think that's also part of the gaslighting or taking the emphasis off you or the attention off you. But you said something that hit. The old folks would say, if you throw a rock, the dog that got hit would holler, right? So you said something, and I'm like, oh, but you're still talking. I can't wait for him to take a breath or whatever. Or sometimes we don't even wait for that. Then I want to talk over you because you said something that made me feel a way. And we're never getting to what the issue really is. And we can't get to a resolution because, one, no one is really trying to hear what the other person is saying. I don't want to be at fault to start with. So when you said something that hurt my feelings, and I think as men, we don't even like using that phrase at all. How often have you said that phrase at all? Let alone to your spouse, and God forbid you said it to another man. It's almost unheard of. Like, we're not doing that, right? But in reality, if you break it down, that's really what it was.
So most of the time, people aren't seeking to understand the other person's point of view. All they care about is what they're doing and the way they feel versus trying to really come to a resolution. It's really, I'm right, you're wrong.
And I have to be right.
Yes.
Because I'm only seeing it from my perspective. We were talking earlier and it was like there's two sides to the story, and I don't think that's true. I think there's three sides to every story. There's your side, and then there's my side, and somewhere overlapping in the middle are overlapping truths to what's really going on here. And depending on how much we want to understand, or how much we're willing to understand, can we communicate and get the other to see my perspective? But I think oftentimes in most relationships, unfortunately, whether they're couples, whether they're brothers, whether they're employer, employee, I'm already right. And I need you to see that I'm right. So what you're talking about, I'm not even trying to hear you. I'm not listening. And I think there's a place of respect, first off, that is necessary, and empathy. Let me just be quiet. Let me not look so desperately for the place to respond. Let me try to hear what he's saying. And then let me express what I'm saying. And somewhere in between there, we can even come to a place where we can agree to disagree because you feel so strongly about how you feel and I feel so strongly about how I feel. But I've at least listened to you and taken into account that what you're saying has validity.
Because conflicts come from everywhere. Yeah. I mean, in every area of life, you'll have a conflict. And if you don't know how to work through them, you will find yourself continually frustrated.
Oh, for sure.
Because even if you win the battle, then you have people who are upset with you. You have people who are disgruntled, and you tend to be, you isolate yourself because everybody's like, man, that's a dude. He doesn't listen. He's hard-headed. And you just become that guy.
So I mentioned as an example, employee, employer. And you said they don't want to listen to you. You run a plant.
Yes.
So you're the boss. Conflict of dealing with a difficult boss. How do you think you deal with that? Coming from a person who is the supervisor or the one who's responsible for the other employees.
I will say I think it's been a growth process. You know, the company that I'm at right now, I've been there 15 years. And I came up through the ranks. I didn't go in there with a management title, nothing like that. I was the average Joe and moved up. And so I do think that helps me to see people as they are because I've worked in the same position that they have. Whereas if somebody just comes in the office and has never done the job, they don't understand the guy's concerns or complaints.
Right.
They're just like, get out there and work. Where I've seen it, man, it's hot out here. Things like that. But there are times when I don't have a choice. This is what I'm being told to do because everybody's got a boss. No matter how you look, everybody's got a boss. And if I'm being told to do that and I tell you to do it, it's not because I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to ask anybody to do anything that I would not do in my own personal life or in business. And so I think coming up through the ranks made it easier for me to understand when people bring things to me. And I always try to operate fairly. Man, I'm going to tell you the first time, hey, man, I really need you to take care of this. And by the time, if it comes to the point that you have to be terminated, that's on you. It's not on me. Because I've given you fair warning about all of the stuff that's gone on. So you may say, oh, man, this guy was wrong for firing me.
He don't like me.
But you can't say that I wasn't fair and didn't give you the warnings. The warning signs were there.
So if I heard you correctly, I think you're validating kind of what I just said about having empathy because you come from a place where you were just a part of the team. And now that you are leading the team, I think that therein lies the difference between someone who has a mentality of being a leader and someone who has a mentality of being a boss. I think a boss, oftentimes, like you said, can come in and they don't really have way to speak to their staff other than it's because I said so.
Well, and something else is they're not relatable to them. The staff views them as somebody totally different than what they are. So there's this void in between that, and they can't relate to one another. Like some of the guys I've worked with 10, 12, 15 years together. So we've built this camaraderie with one another that they feel comfortable, that they can come and say, hey, Scott, this is the problem that we're having. What can you do about it? And there's times that I have to tell them, man, I'm gonna be honest, there ain't nothing I can do about it.
Right.
But I hear your concerns and I will do what I can when I can. But right now, it's just not possible.
I like that. I like that you used the word relatable. I was in leadership for 20 plus years, right? And so it's a way that you can come to someone and lead them versus you're going to do what I told you to do because I'm in charge and you're not. Oftentimes I would say, guys, we have this project and, hey, Scott, can you do me a favor? And inevitably you'd be like, yeah, okay, cool. So what I need for you to do is X, Y, and Z. I'm going to get Dexter to do this. I'm going to do this. And as a whole, we're coming together and we'll accomplish what the project is versus, hey, Scott, go do that. And tell Dexter I said, go do X, Y, and Z. If I'm in a place where you don't see me doing anything sometimes, right?
Putting your hand to the plow. That's what I like to say. Because
I'm not about to trigger you on this.
If I see that you don't put your hand to the plow, I promise you I'm not going to be as accommodating as I would if I saw you work.
Right.
You know, and that goes for outside of work, even in your places of fellowship, where you have what they call nowadays servant leaders. Servant leaders are people who serve and lead, hence the term. And that is the way that you lead, by example.
Absolutely.
If you do not lead by example, you will not gain the respect that you deserve.
So there's that word again, respect.
Respect is a big word in my vocabulary. I don't know about everybody else's. In my vocabulary, respect is a big word, because when I feel like I'm being demeaned or looked down upon, I don't do good with that. And so it's much easier for me if I see something and somebody says, "Hey, Scott, can you help me?" versus saying, "Hey, Scott, go do that."
Absolutely.
Because if I'm helping you, oh man, I'll do anything to help you. If you think you're going to tell me to do something, it doesn't work out well.
Or as I said before, you're asking a favor. Scott, can you do me a favor? Versus, hey, I need you to go do X, Y, Z. And again, as you said, if I see you doing, then I'm more likely to help you do. But if I don't see you doing anything, but you're always demanding or asking strongly to do something, you're less, it breeds conflict.
And you know, that going back to the work environment, there's days that I'll go out into the manufacturing floor and just work with different departments. I'll just get in there, "Hey man, can I help you?" And they're like, "Man, are you sure?" "Yeah, man, what do you need? What do you need help with today?"
Right.
And I may not stay there. I probably won't stay there all day because I got other responsibilities, but I may stay 30 minutes with them and just to see what they have going on, to understand better what they need to do the job.
I talked about putting yourself, there's one side, there's another side, and somewhere in the middle. If they can see that you've placed yourself on their side, then it makes you much more relatable. And so when you ask me to do something, I can say, okay, because that I'm not going to ask you to do something that I myself feel like I'm above doing. And so it just breeds this camaraderie or team atmosphere, and it minimizes conflict that way.
And I think that's the best management style you can have. You know, you can demand out of everybody, and they may do it for a time, but they're not going to do it forever. They don't get tired of it, and they will not be loyal to anything or I wouldn't be loyal to something that I'm demanded to be doing. I'll be loyal to something that I'm willing to do, but not demanded. And people will sometimes they have to do what their boss tells them, but that doesn't mean that they have to like that.
If you work here,
yeah,
you need to do what you're told to do, but there's a way to do that.
It breeds contention, and that is conflict. When you have a workforce that's against management, it is a huge conflict, and you got to learn how to bridge that gap.
Absolutely.
And like I said, it took me time. I've been there 15 years, and I didn't always manage the same ways, but over time, I started learning different skills and different ways to talk to people. Man, you can't always talk to people the way you think, because they're like, "Man, did you just talk to me like that?" And I tend to have a somewhat aggressive speech.
Wow.
And I will say things, and somebody will turn around and be like, "Man, is that how you really talk to me?" And I'm thinking in my head, "Man,
what's the problem?
What's the problem? I was fine." And we got to learn how to talk to people in many different areas of our life, because most of the time, in my opinion, for me, I bring conflict on myself, and it may not. I will definitely feed into the conflict.
Because you're looking for it. You mentioned in the opening, most men have a fight or flight mentality. Sounds like you're kind of stuck on one side more so than the other.
I'm definitely stuck on the fight side more than I am the flight side. But that's a good point for sure, because there are men that they don't want confrontation.
Gotcha.
I'm not that guy.
Okay.
But the guy that doesn't want confrontation, it's the same. The end result's the same as the fight or flight. You're not resolving the problem. You're not resolving the conflict at all in the right way. the fight or the flight. Because if you just decide, oh, don't get involved in this, the problem's still not solved.
Absolutely. Conflict or confrontation doesn't always have to be negative.
No.
And oftentimes it is quite necessary. And it's the way that you approach it, I think, that allows us to get to a resolution easier or better. So you said something. I live by, or I believe, I'm going to treat people no less than the way that I myself want to be treated, which takes us back to the respect thing. I'm all about respect. I expect respect because I give respect. And then I'm going to give you an area of grace also, because just because you're disrespectful, I may think that it is because of a lack of understanding.
I think my area of grace is smaller.
It's much smaller. I believe that.
I think that area is I need to grow that area.
But we all have boundaries. And even with me, I'm giving you an area of grace because maybe it's lack of understanding or lack of information. So then I start talking to you in a very direct tone to make sure that you do understand the words that are coming out of my mouth, because conflict can be negative.
And in previous podcasts, you've even said that you'll ask the question, let me understand you. And I think that is where that's where I lack is, hey, let me understand what you're saying to me. Is this really what you're saying? Because then we need to do some more discussing.
And you, just like you said, I'm cool. You got that out of what I said?
Yeah.
And it gives you an opportunity to reset and come back at it again. We were talking earlier, and I think one of the largest problems in our country, because you can find conflict in many different forms, is that everyone wants to be heard, but very few of us are listening, right? And so we think that if I start talking louder, you're just not hearing me. No, I hear you, but I'm not understanding. If I put it in bold letters on a poster board and put it in your face and whatever, that's going to make you get it. Well, that probably is going to put me much more in that defensive place, because you're just shouting. You're not trying to hear what I'm saying, and I'm definitely not trying to hear what you're saying because of the way that you're coming at me. So I think that to want to understand, to have a place of empathy, that let me listen to the person. And I think that if we could do that, I think that we could have a much smoother place of getting to an understanding. And we may still not agree. That is just a truth to any conflict. At the end of it, we still may not agree, but we could have a level of respect. And I understand better why you feel the way you feel, or why you are presenting whatever your position is, more so than our first way of coming at it is just resistance
right.
and fight.
I'm right,
already right.
And you're wrong. And that's where I think for me, I got to work on is, hey, there's got to be some grace. There has to be some grace somewhere to work through the conflict.
You keep saying the word grace, and I say this all the time. Grace is one of those things that when I'm in a position to receive it, please give me an unlimited amount. If I'm in a position to receive grace, hey man, give me another chance. My bad. I'm so sorry. You talked about if it comes to a place of terminating someone, right? Come on, man, give me another chance, man. Look out for your boy. But if I'm in a place to give grace, now I can come up with a whole list of reasons why you should have known better. You shouldn't have talked to me that way. You shouldn't have done the thing that you did. So because you did, let me give you this smoke.
Well, me and you've talked about the story about, man, my life has not always been peaches and cream.
Gotcha.
I've lived a pretty rough life, and there was a individual, we'll call him Deric.
Let's call him Deric. What's up, Deric?
Me and Deric had serious conflict.
A conflict.
That came to altercation.
Okay.
And it was definitely on me because it started out, we were just talking about a football game, and then all of a sudden it got out of hand, and I decided I wanted to use some derogatory terms, and
Deric came with smoke.
Deric brought the smoke, and I thought I was gonna be eating Thanksgiving dinner through a straw because Deric was not playing with me.
Right.
So at that time, we were staying probably 400 or 500 miles from where we are now.
Okay.
So I get this job, and I move to another city, about 400 or 500 miles from where me and Deric got into it. And I move up the ranks, and I become where I'm hiring people now. And I'm sitting in my office. I got an HR rep, and I told him, hey, just send the interviews in as, we're hiring people. Just send them in. And I'm sitting at my desk and got my head down, and I look up, and it's Deric.
You were scared.
No, not at all. But I'll say this. I was definitely, I looked and I'm like, wow. And he says, Scott. And I said, wow, it's been many years. And he says, man, I really need a job. He said, man, I don't have nothing. I'm
down.
I'm on my last leg, man.
Yeah.
And he said, what do you do here? I said, I run the place. And he's like, wow, how far we've come, because when me and him in our previous life, we were not, it wasn't a good place.
Gotcha.
And I end up hiring Deric. And it was one of those things where, in retrospect, it taught me you never know what's going to come back.
Right.
There was a huge conflict. I mean, to the point where, I was tore up. And I could have put vengeance and said, man, I ain't got to do nothing for you. This is what happened. But it gave me a place to show grace. And it showed the growth in me personally. And it was a good story, because it taught me how to be a better human. And I'm not saying it dealt with a conflict that was resolved at that moment, but that conflict got resolved many years later. And Deric ended up not being able to work for me long, but I feel like it was more for me than it was for him.
The opportunity was for you.
Absolutely.
Growth for you. Right.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask if Deric still worked there.
Deric does not still work there, but I didn't talk to Deric, but
Deric had the
he could come
opportunities.
back.
He was one of those where you're like, hey, man, I keep talking to you about this thing.
No, Deric ended up having to move away for a while. So, but I'll tell you, if he came back, I would do the exact same thing,
Right.
because it was just, like I said, I believe it was more for me than it was for him. It was just an appointed time, because to think out of millions of people, he walks into that office. Coincidence don't happen very often.
And we talk about coincidence. It's not one of those things that we really believe in. Things happen because they were supposed to happen, and you have the opportunity to deal with it however you're going to deal with it, and good, bad, or indifferent. And however that turns out, if it wasn't for the best, you may or may not get the opportunity again to grow beyond that place. Not often with the same person, but the same situation can present itself again, and just see where you are. And it's good to have those places of growth. It's funny, man. I feel so triggered, and I want to tell this story. So we just celebrated our 30th class reunion, and I can't believe I'm talking about this. I might get you to edit all of this out. But I'm thinking about growth and an opportunity of conflict and confrontation. And if you know me, you know I love to antagonize just for kicks and giggles, right? For kicks and giggles. Not really anything malicious most of the time. Don't even look at me like that, bro. Don't even look at me like that. So my ex-girlfriend and her husband come into the venue, and I see him. I know of him, but we've never really met, right? So I greet him. Hey, what's up? And he's looking at me like, I should know you. And, you know, an opportunity for me to antagonize initially, and I don't, right? I'm just like, yeah. And coincidentally, his name was Deric.
Who knows?
It wasn't, but so I'm like, yeah, Deric. He was like, I said, yeah, you're Teresa's husband, right? Also not Teresa, but for this story, we're protecting the innocent. And so he was like, yeah, so you know what I mean? I dapped him up, whatever. I didn't even, in this point, you know, even acknowledge her because I don't want to make people feel away. So I go through the whole evening and, you know what I mean? We had a great time at the reunion. I have a friend who won silent auctions for a couple of different pieces, but because now he lives in another state far off, they had left the venue early because they had to take an early flight. So when I saw that he had won the pieces, I called him and said, hey, bro, look, you won. He was like, bet. Their hotel was right around the corner from where we were having the venue. I said, man, I'll grab the items and I'll just bring them to you. He said, bet. Cool. I ended up having another conversation, forgetting about the items. I left the hotel. I mean, in the car, me and Nikki were around the corner, and I'm like, oh, I didn't get those items. So I got to come back, right? As I come back upstairs into the venue, I see Deric and Teresa, right? I don't want them to make them feel some type of way because, bro, it's 30 years later, right? That ain't even, I know. Anyway, I was about to say, I had the prettiest girl in the room anyway, so that ain't what we talk. I'm not interested in your wife, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you just happen to look at this, I'm not interested in your wife. You know what I mean? That was 30 years ago. Anyway, so when we come up, he says, I dap him up like I would dap you up. You know what I mean? If I came through. And he was like, yeah, man, I appreciate you looking out for Teresa when y'all was in high school. And I'm like, okay, I did what I could do. He said, as I'm walking off, you know what I mean? He was like, yeah, I got her now. Bro, was that your attempt at a shot at me? Bro, do you not know that I could have turned around and said one thing, wrecked your whole evening, right? But I was like, why? First off, it's not even my, you know what I mean? I am not interested. I'm not concerned. I just told you. I got 24 years in, 23 married in a month. Next month will be 23 years. I've got my own handful. I got my hands full where I am. I don't have time to be looking in your basket, right? But I didn't respond. I went on. I got the items. I left. You know what I mean? I chunked them all the dues. And I thought about it afterwards, like, bro tried to shoot one at me, right? And my personality, those of you who know MJ know, I would have taken that and ran with it up 100 yards to the back of the end zone to celebrate. You know what I mean? But I didn't. So anyway, growth, conflict, whether it was, and I don't know that there was a need for a resolution for that. I could see that if insecurity was a person, you introduced yourself as Deric. You should have said, hi, I'm insecure. And that would have been okay, right? So just growth.
Sometimes conflict doesn't need an answer. It's better off left alone because all you're going to do is make the situation worse. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You know, conflict happens in everyone's life. What matters is how it's dealt with and what we learn from the situation.
Absolutely.
When conflict is dealt with right, it's a life-changing experience. And I believe that it is a growth process, and we're all learning how to deal with it appropriately.
Man.
And I'm not there yet.
I was going to say, if conflict is done wrong, it will be a learning process.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the important thing, to grow through it. And as you said, we all have conflict. No one is immune to it. So how you deal with it can determine, one, your growth. It may be for the growth of someone else. So how you respond, good, bad, or indifferent, may not always be about you. It may help someone else to grow in that moment.
And it helps to have like somebody that'll tell you, because you've told me many times, hey man, you need to handle that situation different. So having somebody that'll tell you that is very important in your life.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
that wraps it up for today. Thank you guys for joining us on Heart of the Matter. We aim to give you content that matters in different areas of life. We are Scott and Marcus.
Stay strong. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.